Hello again, and welcome to another of Mosaic's coffee breaks. Mosaic is, of course, a collaboration of the organisations shown at the front of this presentation, and that collaboration focuses very much on the ownership issues associated with mid-market law firms. And when we say ownership, we mean everything associated with ownership, mergers and acquisitions, partnership structures, succession planning, partner exits, and everything associated with all of those issues. I hope you enjoy this broadcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest in the series of Mosaic Coffee Breaks. In today's session, we're going to look at some of the ideas that the five of us have for helping law firms in these challenging, interesting, booming times, whatever it is that you feel your law firm is facing. Tom, can I ask you to paint a picture for us?
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. It's interesting you use booming there. I think many law firms over the last sort of year, 18 months ago, have been booming, haven't they? We had things like the stamp duty holiday, or we had the sort of resurgence post-COVID. And we reached a stage, I think, where many people were comfortably adding 10 or 15% to charge-out rates, you know, at least following inflation, if not even beating it slightly, albeit in a world where inflation itself was very high. However, I think what we're about to speak about is whether we're just coming slightly off the crest of that wave. I mean, not necessarily awful, just to be clear, but maybe just slightly off the crest of that wave. And I think certainly if you look at some of the results that are publicly available, some of the listed law firms, for example, they're reporting slightly more average results rather than bumper results that we may have seen a year or two ago. And I'm very conscious that most law firms are March year ends, so most people have probably just finalised their sort of 23-24 budget, and I just wonder if it's got quite a lot of cost inflation, quite a lot of wage inflation, but maybe not quite the same at the revenue line, and suddenly profits are not awful, but just not quite what they were a year or two ago. So I think each of us has just got some ideas about what we might do in a scenario where things are just coming off the boil a little.
Thank you, Tom. That's really helpful. And certainly, I've been speaking to a number of clients in the last month or so, looking at 6, 7, 8, 9% wage inflation for the year ahead. I'm wondering how on earth they're going to maintain profits against those kind of pressures. Barry, what would you be advising your clients?
Well, this is the world I've inhabited now for more years than I care to remember, having been a finance director and prior to getting in the legal sector in some fairly squeezed manufacturing businesses. And I think the first thing to say is that in the kind of market that we're in at the moment, this cost inflation is effectively unavoidable. Therefore, we have to look at two other angles of overcoming that. One of which is very much in your territory, Nigel, and that is making sure that wherever possible we've got our pricing right and that we can address that. And in some cases, maybe we have to be turning down work which has previously been marginal and now would become loss-making. So I'll lob that one over to you for more detail because you're the expert on that. But the other area which is clear is we have to be much sharper in making sure that we get value for money out of our expenditure and not just accept that we can add X% to our costs and shrug our shoulders. We have to become more tight in both in our purchasing and procurement of third-party expenditure, and there is an awful lot that can be done to take quite large percentages out of relatively small amounts of overhead expenditure. Generally speaking, the controls on the quantity of things that we do, simple things like the number of IT licenses that we've got. It's staggering when you do an audit of those kind of things, just how much actual wastage there is. The other area that I would be looking, and particularly in the small and medium-sized sector that we specialise in, is making sure that we get absolute full value for every hour that our lawyers are putting in. The difference between the number of chargeable hours that are expected in the medium-sized firms and the larger firms is not minor. It's an absolute quantum leap, and I'm not expecting provincial firms to be getting the 1,700 hours that are demanded in the city. But I think too often what we see is an average of about 800 hours a year. Or put it this way, fee earners only earning fees half the time. Half the time's not good enough. We've got to be able to get much better use of that. And that, hopefully, will enable us to put a brake on recruitment and stop seeing recruitment as the only avenue for growth. So there's one or two thoughts, and happy to throw it back to you, Nigel, to put flesh on the bones, particularly on the pricing angle.
Barry, those are very interesting thoughts, and I will pick up pricing in a moment. But I wonder if one of my other colleagues would like to pick up Barry's second point there, which is dealing with, well, the last part of your second point, Barry, which is the difficulty posed for law firm leaders now, where it's almost become accepted that 800 or 900 chargeable hours is okay from fee earners who don't have any managerial responsibility. That seems to have been a drop of about 300 hours in the last 3 or 4 years, which the profession's taken on the chin. And I think that I've certainly seen some apocryphal evidence to suggest that managing partners are nervous of addressing it when there's so much volatility in the labour market. Is that something you'd like to pick up, Mark?
Yes, happy to do that. I think all very, very sound points that we've had so far. And certainly what I would say is I'm just getting the feeling, talking to law firm clients at the moment, that cash flow is beginning to come back, to the fore. They're beginning to think about where we're going to pay these bills from. So getting productivity from your fee earners is always a challenge, and especially, as you've said, Nigel, where there's a perception that there's a shortage of good people and therefore good people could leave. Maybe you need to ask yourself the question, if someone's only billing 800 hours a year, whether they are a good person. And of course, the other thing I do, going back to a little gripe of mine that I'm sure I've spoken about loads of times before, is around the quality of management within law firms. Going up to someone and saying, you've been billing 800 hours a year for the last 3 years, you've got to bill 1,000, isn't going to work. You've got to spend some time sitting down with them and looking at what they're doing and reviewing their sort of daily workload. And it's a big commitment to help them learn how they can increase their billing or the effectiveness of their billing. I might play devil's advocate with you slightly, Nigel, here, and go, you and I have discussed pricing, and you've taught me so much about pricing, and as to whether the billable hour is actually the thing we should be looking at, or whether we just say to people, this is an amount we expect you to bill, be that 3 to 4 times your salary, and use clever pricing to do that. I don't care whether you bill 1,500 hours or 100 hours. If you bring me in 3 to 4 times your salary, I'm happy with that as a law firm partner. I don't mind how you do it. But I think getting that productivity up is key, and that will involve looking at the whole way in which you run your firm. It's not just I'm sure most of you people aren't sat there at their desks twiddling their thumbs for half the time. That what they are doing is probably stuff that they shouldn't be doing, that cheaper people in the organization could be doing for them, or if they had better admin and better systems, things that they wouldn't need to do, so they could focus on doing the work. And
You know, that's some really interesting points we've got so far. And with an idea of keeping this to our usual 8 to 10 minutes, we'll make that part 1 of this coffee break recording. So thank you all for watching part 1, and part 2 will be broadcast again in the not too distant future. So we hope to see you again for part 2.